Hey guys, welcome back to Fantasy Tipped. My name is Julian and I'm finally back with the preseason content for the 2022-2023 season, guys. So I'll be posting videos regularly once again. Now, I was gonna start off my preseason content with a video on my hits and misses of my preseason content from last year. However, the World Juniors is starting today, so I wanted to get a video out on the World Juniors and let you guys know which players to look out for that could actually have some fantasy value as early as this year. That's what this video is going to be all about, guys. Just talking about 5 guys who I think may actually have some fantasy value this year in fantasy hockey. As usual, guys, leave a like, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and hit that notification bell if you guys want reminders every time I post a new video. I'm going to be posting some really solid content this offseason, so you won't want to miss anything. So let's jump into the substance of the video, guys, and here's a list of guys that you should be looking out for. Even though they won't necessarily have fantasy value this year, they could in future years. For example, Connor Bedard is going to be the first overall draft pick at the end of this season. He's going to be very valuable next year, and he will be drafted by an NHL team first overall. You heard that, it's going to happen. So wherever he ends up, he will end up playing in the NHL in his first season. The dude is just so incredibly talented. Trust me, he's going to be fantasy relevant next year. Now, you might also recognize some guys that were drafted this year in the most recent NHL draft. Logan Cooley by the Arizona Coyotes, 3rd overall. David Jiricek by the Columbus Blue Jackets, 6th overall. Lekkerimäki by the Vancouver Canucks, 15th overall, and Joakim Kemmel by the Nashville Predators, 17th overall. Also have Brad Lambert on this list by the Winnipeg Jets, 30th overall, although initially that guy was projected to be a top 5 selection. So Brad Lambert, we're going to have to see how he develops, but could potentially be a huge steal for the Winnipeg Jets. Let's see how he does in this tournament. 2 other guys that were drafted in this year's draft, but I don't have listed on this list, are Ogren from Sweden by the Minnesota Wild, 19th overall, and Kulich from Czechia by the Buffalo Sabres, 28th overall. They're definitely also guys that could have some value in the future. Luke Hughes and Coronado are 2 other guys I have on this list. They're playing for Team USA. They're not going to make the NHL this year. However, they are very, very talented. I think they're going to have a very solid career in the NHL as soon as next year. They're definitely guys to watch out for. Now let's jump into the list of players that could actually have fantasy relevance in the NHL this year. And first on the list, I have Thomas Bordeleau, drafted by the San Jose Sharks, and is playing for Team USA. Last year, he played a little bit in the NHL, had 5 points in 8 games. They were all assists. The problem is that he's a center, and obviously the Sharks have some decent amount of center depth. They have Hertl, Couture, and Bonino as their top 3 centers. However, last year they kind of fixed that when Bordeleau came into the lineup by throwing Bonino onto the wing and giving Bordeleau the 3rd line center role. The same thing can happen for this entire season if he impresses enough at this tournament and in training camp. But despite this, obviously he is going to be a 3rd line center, so his fantasy value will be pretty limited unless he does see power play one time, in which case it could be a little bit higher. But if one of the top 2 centers, Hertl and Couture, gets injured or just really plays really, really poorly, then maybe Bordeleau could even move up to the top 2 lines and could potentially have a little bit more value if something like that were to happen. Next on the list, I have Simon Edvinsson of the Detroit Red Wings playing for Team Sweden in this tournament. Now, this guy's going to be an absolutely amazing defender in the future. Steve Yzerman drafted him, and we all know Steve Yzerman is fantastic at drafting, and this guy has already been compared to Moritz Seider, which is an amazing compliment considering that that's the guy who won the freaking Rookie of the Year Calder Trophy last year. So that's a pretty good player to be compared to. Now, Daily Faceoff actually has him in the projected lineup for next season. However, Detroit does already have a decent amount of defensemen on the roster. They have 9 defensemen, not including Edmondson, so he's actually a 10th defenseman right now. So it seems kind of unlikely that he makes the roster. However, if he has an amazing tournament and he has a really good training camp, Edmondson could end up cracking the roster in Detroit. They may not have any choice but to play him this year, and then he could actually have, a decent amount of fantasy value. I don't think he's going to have a crazy amount of fantasy value because Seider is going to continue manning that top power play, but Edmondson could potentially see some PP2 time and could see a good amount of ice time as well if he really does play well. Then I have my first Canadian on the list, Logan Stankoven, and he just torched the WHL in the past season, scoring 45 goals and 104 points in just 59 games. I've always enjoyed this guy as a prospect, and not just because he has a funny name. I think he's going to impress this year's tournament, and I think that he's got a really good shot to make Dallas's roster this year. Maybe potentially even the top 6. Jamie Benn and Seguin are kind of on the decline, so there is a chance that he could end up centering that top 6. I could see potentially a line of Marchment, Stankoven, and Seguin as that second line, and then Jamie Benn maybe just centering or winging on the third line. It's definitely a possibility if he impresses enough. If he really impresses at this tournament and in training camp and actually cracks the lineup and plays in the top 6, he could really be a dark horse for the Calder this year, which would be really, really cool to see because nobody really has him on the radar this year, but I do think he is a very, very solid player, and I think he has a really good chance to impress at this year's World Juniors tournament. And at number 2, I have another Canadian. Kent Johnson was drafted by Columbus in 2021, and in 9 games played last year, he had 3 points, all assists, and he also had a very solid season with the University of Michigan. Now, Columbus dealt Bjorkstrand to Seattle this year for basically nothing, so that could potentially open up a spot for Kent Johnson in the top 6. I think he's making the team for sure this year because he is that talented. He's that good, guys. If you've seen him play in the past, you know he's a very, very, very good player. And I do think that they should be playing him in the top 6, in which case he has a really solid chance at winning the Calder this year. Let's see how he does in this tournament, guys, because I think he's going to be a lot of fun to watch. He's actually the only player on this list, including my number 1, that NHL actually has ranked in their top 250 players this year. They have him ranked right at the end, 249th best fantasy player this year. And at number 1, I have yet another Canadian with Mason McTavish. Go Canada. They have a really good team this year for this year's World Juniors tournament. They have some high hopes this year going into the tournament. Now, Mason McTavish is going to be an incredible player in the league. Last year, he had 3 points in 9 games played and looked really solid every single game. He should basically have a guaranteed huge role in the Anaheim offense this year. Last year, he looked good. This year, he's going to be even better. And he's pretty much got a locked-in place on the top line, if not at the very least the top 6. He's one of my favorites to win the Calder this year, and I legitimately think he has a very, very big shot of doing so. Daily Faceoff has him projected on a line with Ryan Strome and Frank Vatrano, but I see him probably on a top line with Zegras and Terry, and if that's the case, man, could McTavish ever have a strong season for the Ducks. And there you have it, guys. Mason McTavish is my number 1 guy to watch for in this year's tournament. Canada's got a very strong team. Should be a lot of fun to watch. Definitely nice to have some hockey in the summer. Something, to look forward to before the season begins. Once again, guys, please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and hit that notification bell. I'll be posting a whole lot of preseason content. You will not want to miss that. I'll be posting a lot and very, very frequently. So definitely hit that notification bell if you don't want to miss any of my preseason content. And until next time, guys, I'll catch you in the next episode of Fantasy Tipped.